Hello, this is Dr. Cooper, and this is Lecture 6, Part 2, a dialogue between physicalists and dualists. So let's set up this debate as if two people are meeting, a dualist and a physicalist, and they're trying to convince each other of their point of view. So the dualist says, okay, you can have a dead body, but it just lies there. The living body is animated. A soul then animates the body, and when the body and the soul have been separated, the soul loses its ability to give the body's command. The physicalist says, slow down, this is all too quick. You're putting the cart before the horse. Before you can have an animated body, you need a functioning body. So let's say I drop my phone off a third floor balcony. I will still have all the same parts to the phone as I did before, except now it's not functioning. Some bits are smashed and some are no longer wired up properly. Any physical object can break, even a body. Therefore, we don't need to say that there was something immaterial there, something like a soul or a mind or a spirit that was there that made it function. Physically, there's no difference between a dead body and a live one, except some of the bits are smashed up and others are not wired up properly. There is no need to appeal to an immaterial soul. All right, says the dualist. All right, but can we appeal to a soul's existence because we don't just function, or we don't just function like a phone? Yeah, while we live, the body acts purposefully. There has to be something pulling the strings, something directing the body. Physicalist. Okay, I admit that humans are not like phones. They move about, and they don't just move about randomly. Maybe, though, humans are like heat-seeking missiles that are able to track down aeroplanes or other missiles. Those are not just moving randomly, they move purposefully. But at the end of the day, it's just another piece of the missile that makes them do that. Or let's take the example of a robot that can move with purpose and perform tasks. That is all controlled by the CPU inside the robot. You don't need to appeal to any soul to explain why the robot moves in a purposeful and controlled way. Dualist. Okay, but heat-seeking missiles or robots might move purposefully, but only because they are obeying orders, and those orders were given to it by something outside of itself. Maybe human bodies need something outside of themselves to control and command the body. That could be the soul. Physicalist. Okay, I have two rebuttals for you. First, if you believe in souls, maybe you also believe in God. What's to say that God, who is famous for modeling clay into Adam and breathing life into him, maybe God switches us on, and then there doesn't need to be anything more to us. If God switches us on, we don't need a soul or a mind or a spirit, we're just switched on. But you don't even need to believe in God to refute your soul as command center theory. We can appeal to evolution and biology, and we can argue that the instructions for the body are built in. There are innate psychological programs that get passed along with our DNA, and that's what gets us going. And then after that, it's all down to learning and adapting. And look, we are moving purposefully. Dualist. Look, we are not just robots with some kind of programming in our brain that we are following. We can think. Robots can't think. There's got to be something more to us than robots. We can't just be physical things. Physicalist. Well, 2005 calling. Have you not heard of a little thing called AI? Sure, a simple machine like a lawnmower can't think, But an AI nowadays can reason and plan and have beliefs and desires. And then they can put these things into action if they're hooked up to the right non-thinking equipment. You know what? Actually, I just had a really scary thought. What if a thinking AI is hooked up to another thinking piece of equipment and they don't agree? Maybe that will be the only jobs humans have left. They will be in quote unquote human resources when the humans are the resource that sorts out disputes between AIs. Dualist. Now, they would probably just build another AI for that. Physicalist. Yes, you're right. But my bigger point is that your appeal to the common sense that we can't just be robots is starting to sound a little robotist. It sounds as if you are saying there are no physical objects that could have beliefs or desires except man with his so-called soul. Dualist. Okay, so perhaps a robot with an AI could have beliefs or desires, but it couldn't have real emotions like us. Can a machine be afraid? Can it fall in love? Can it worry? Can it get depressed? Physicalist. Well, I asked Gemini and it said, no, an AI system cannot worry or get depressed. AI systems are built on algorithms, data, and computational logic. But that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to have a soul to feel emotions. Gemini also says that emotions, including worry and depression, are tied to biological and psychological processes, consciousness, neurotransmitters, and physical embodiment. Therefore, you actually need a body to have emotions and feel these things, not a soul. Dualist. Okay, back up there a little. Did you just say consciousness? Physicalist. Yeah. Dualist. Can you physicalists offer any explanation of consciousness? Physicalist. Dualist. How is consciousness possible? Dualism offers a better explanation of consciousness. Simple, we have souls, and our consciousness is housed where? In our souls. Physicalist. Dualist. Seems for now the dualists and the physicalists have reached a tie, so they go out for boba. And on the way back, though, dualist, free will. Physicalist, darn it. Dualist, while I can begrudgingly admit that when it comes to animation, function, purposefulness, thinking, and emotion, we could basically just be meat robots. And neither of us could really hang consciousness on anything. Perhaps what proves we have souls is free will. And follow me here. If we are just our physical bodies, then we would be subject to deterministic laws. For every event that happens, a previous event had to happen. Let's call that cause. And then something has to happen after the event. Absolutely has to happen. Let's call that effect. But this does not hold true for humans. There is no inevitability. Ergo, therefore, there is no determinism, and all purely physical systems are subject to determinism. Therefore, I am not a purely physical system. Therefore, I have a soul. Physicalist. But are you really sure you have free will? Or do you just believe that you do? How do you know that you are not just a physical object that labors under the illusion that you have a soul? And moreover, if we look at quantum mechanics, dualist, do we have to? Physicalist, yes. If we look at quantum mechanics, then it is possible that you are laboring under a false assumption. Despite what many may have believed about the fundamental laws of physics, not all of them are deterministic, are they? So here's this radioactive atom that has an 80% chance of breaking down in the next 24 hours. So it also has a 20% chance of not breaking down in the next 24 hours. Those 24 hours pass and it breaks down. Can we say why? Sure. So we repeat the process. This time the atom does not break down. Can we say why? Sure. But can we explain why the ones that break down, and the ones that don't break down, don't? No, we can't do that. Therefore, not all physical systems are deterministic. And therefore, you start blathering on there that there's just got to be some underlying causal system. No, there doesn't. You're just assuming that determinism must be true. So you are therefore imagining that both free will and determinism must exist. They only exist in your head, lady. Okay, so if you're going to go all quantum mechanics, I'm going to throw in some supernatural phenomena at you. What about ESP? Do you have an explanation for extrasensory perception? Do you? How about ghosts? Or what about near-death experiences? When lots and lots of people say they see a white light and their dead relatives, or seances, or communications with the dead. There's something there that needs explanation, and the best explanation is the soul. If you surveyed everyone around the world across all cultures, a certain amount would swear they've had these supernatural experiences. So how can you say that nothing immaterial survives death? That no soul, no mind, no spirit survives death, when every day ordinary people see ghosts or have eerily similar near-death experiences or communicate with the dead? How can you explain these things? Physicalist. I can't. But maybe all maybe hoaxes. Maybe all senses, maybe hoaxes, maybe all ghosts are just an imagination, maybe all near-death experiences may just be what happens when we physically experience as we approach the unreturnable death state. But I don't have to debunk them all in order to say that it would be possible to find other supernatural answers, for these supernatural phenomena without an appeal to the soul. In other words, the soul might be an explanation, but is it the best possible explanation? As a physicalist, I believe in the body, but not in the soul. And there's nothing that you've said here that convinces me that there's a soul. The best explanation for things for me is that there's no soul. Dualist. Okay, I haven't convinced you, but nothing you've said has convinced me that there isn't a soul. Physicalist. Well, that's because you believe there is, and that's a matter of faith, and therefore it requires no proof. For you, the best explanation is always going to be that there is a soul. Dualist. Yep. Physicalist. Same time next week. Dualist. Yes, absolutely. It's been nice catching up. Say hello to the missus for me. So as I was saying earlier, dialogues like this one I just made up, uh, are a very old literary tradition going back to the classical period in Europe. These kind of dialogues. But the dialogues between the body and the soul were very popular in the medieval period. And we've talked about abstractions before. We've talked about anthropomorphical, oh my goodness, anthropomorphized personifications of death. That's what we talked about on the first lecture. So in the medieval period, they also anthropomorphized and personified the body and the soul. These separate abstract ideas got into conversations, and the different characters tried to persuade each other that their point of view was right. Now, this was kind of a loaded dialogue because everybody knew that the soul was going to win, because the soul is trying to persuade the body to live right so that the soul has a better afterlife, and the body's trying to say, well, I want to indulge myself. And of course, this is written in a way that's loaded to so the soul kind of wins and the body says, oh, okay, I'll look after you better. But that's not the case in the dialogue I just made up. Both came away still believing in their original point of view. The physicalist believed that they were just a body, and the dualist believed that they were both body and soul. In the end, they both realized the best explanation is what's the best explanation for them. And ultimately, that's something that is a matter of faith. Now, you may have come down on one side or another of the physicalist and dualist debate, but I'm not sure how many of you would have changed your minds. In some ways, this dialogue about the existence of the soul reflects a certain line of argument about the existence of God put forward by St. Anselm of Canterbury back in the Middle Ages, and this is the so-called ontological proof of God. Quote, God is a being than which nothing greater can be conceived. God is a being than which nothing greater can be conceived. So in other words, God exists because such a being is understood in the mind, and we can conceive of a God, but it's greater to exist in reality than in the mind. Therefore, it is necessary for the greatest possible being to exist in reality. But hang on there a minute, said Guanilio, a monk that was a contemporary of St. Anselm. One can recognize the word God without holding the entire concept of God in your mind. People very often recognize a word without fully understanding what it refers to. And because we can't understand what God refers to because it's unlike any other thing, it must be impossible to say what God is, because our understanding of new objects is based on old objects. What do you mean? Well, think about being asked what a new plant you've never eaten before tastes like. Say, wood sorrel. So you taste some, and you might say it tastes peppery or citrusy or grassy or cuminy, but you probably won't say it tastes wood sorrel-y, because it's a new object to your understanding and you have no prior concept of wood sorrel. But now you do. So when you're asked to say what a second plant tastes like, wood sorrel-y is in your toolbox. It is an old object that you can base an understanding of a new object on. Therefore, God, like wood sorrel, does not necessarily have to exist in our minds to have been real all along. The wood sorrel was already there. You just never tasted it. So the state of now being in our minds is not what made God real. It's not what made wood sorrel real. So Giuliano continues, I have in my understanding all manner of objects that have absolutely no existence in themselves. Okay, I have in my understanding all manner of objects that have absolutely no existence in themselves. And so I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Griffins and unicorns. We can have in our minds ideas about griffins and unicorns, pictures of griffins and unicorns, but they don't have existence in themselves. Therefore, because I can have in my mind a unicorn, it doesn't make it real, any more than having God in my mind does. And then St. Thomas Aquinas showed up and kind of whacked them both about the ears, metaphorically speaking, and said God is ineffable. He's meant to be a mystery. Therefore, God resists all attempts to define God, let alone attempts to analyze whether necessary existence is a part of God. So then, Aquinas does the mic drop and walks off stage. So you might be thinking, Dr. Cooper, what was the point of this infomercial for Philosophy 1000 and Theology 1000? Well, admitting that the last theological point was only from the perspective of medieval Christian theology, the point is that these questions about the nature of God or gods or goddesses or other supernatural beings, and questions about ourselves and the nature of our bodies and souls, and the fact that the question that does anything immaterial in us exist after our deaths, these questions have preoccupied humans for the last 60 or 70,000 years, or maybe longer. And all of these societies and cultures have questioned and prodded their beliefs about these things based on what they can observe and what they can't observe. But they can come up with diverse answers to these questions. They will have also been okay without having proof per se. The proof was in their faith. It was in what they believed in. So how do we know? How do we know that all these people in these past cultures were asking these questions? Well, we know by the way that the dead are treated. Egyptians' mummies would not have been treated so expensively and extensively, prepared for the afterlife, if the Egyptians did not have as core belief that something of us survives death. And medieval monks would not have argued about how we can prove the existence of God if they were not already convinced there was a God whose existence needed proving. We are going to move on now to examine in more detail the beliefs about the soul and the afterlife of the medieval Europeans. And then for your homework today, you're going to look at beliefs about the afterlife of the ancient Egyptians. And we will also see how over time these ideas can change in both communities. Okay, so I thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the videos.